Audit and Risk Management Committee on this meeting of Thursday 12th of June. Before we start, I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be recorded and that the recording will be subsequently be available for public listening. Do we have any Sederunt apologies?
Good morning. We have no members present today. I have apologies from Councillor Geddes and Councillor Stitt.
Thank you very much. I'd like at this time to place on thanks record my thanks to Councillor Alistair Geddes for his role in former chair of this committee. I'm sure people are aware of the situation within the administration, and I'm sure that will come to light the further on we go through the council diary over the next couple of months. Alistair has helped to ensure the work of this committee plays a key part in improving how our council works, and I'd like to place my personal thanks to him for the support and encouragement that he's given me as the Vice Chair of this committee. Do we have any declarations of interest? Okay, then we'll go on to the minute of meeting of 22nd of April. Is that a true record? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you. We'll now go on to item number 4, which is Audit Scotland's Assurance and Improvement Plan for 2014 to 17. This report will be presented by Anthony Clark from Audit Scotland. Welcome, Anthony, to the committee. The auditor from Audit Scotland will present members with an overview of the 2014-17 Assurance and Improvement Plan, which covers 4 areas: the local priorities in public service reform, corporate assessment, service performance, improving and transforming public services, public performance reporting, and having received the briefing from Audit Scotland, will then be for members of this committee to consider the Assurance and Improvement Plan. So, Annie, do you wish to add anything to your report?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for allowing me to present to the committee today. It's very important, I think, that elected members get a briefing on both the shared risk assessment process and also the risks and the planned scrutiny work for your council. Audit Scotland and our scrutiny partners think that's an important part of the transparency and accountability of this process. So it's very important that we come and speak to you today. My briefing will be quite brief. I just want to cover 3 things quite quickly. Firstly, a background to the process, what we did and how we did it. Secondly, the risk assessment and the scrutiny plan for the council. And then thirdly, I'd like to talk very briefly about our plans for perhaps improving the shared risk assessment process next year. So if I start with the background, Mr. Haswell's covering report gives a very good overview of why we have a shared risk assessment process. I mean, there are a number of reasons, really. Firstly, by bringing the different scrutiny bodies together, the audit and inspection agencies, we think we can avoid overlap and duplication of work. You might remember that in the past it was quite common for the council to perhaps receive a best value audit one week, a housing inspection the next week, a social work inspection the week after. Our view is that by working together through the shared risk assessment process, we can help to avoid those overlaps and duplications of effort. Secondly, it allows us, as audit and inspection agencies, to share learning about the council and to avoid asking the same questions 2 or 3 times. And we think that helps to, if you like, reduce the burden that's placed on the council when you're audited and inspected. Thirdly, an important part of the process is about us as auditors and inspectors actually understanding what the council's trying to do. That's important to us because we think it's important that audit and inspection reflects local circumstances. And finally, we think it allows us to hopefully build a mature relationship with the council whilst at the same time maintaining our independence. So those are the 4 reasons why we have the process. What was new this year? You'll see from pages 14 and 19 of your papers that this year we spent a bit of time focusing on what you might call the public service reform agenda. So thinking about community planning, thinking about health and social care integration, police and fire reform, and welfare reform. It seemed to us as auditors and inspectors that these are things that are very important to you as elected members and very important for your officers of the council. Therefore, we as auditors and inspectors need to understand how you're approaching these big and important developments. I'll turn briefly now to the actual risk assessment itself and the scrutiny plan. Obviously, members will be aware that this Assurance and Improvement Plan was written before the recent political changes in the council. So obviously it captures a moment of time that's slightly different to where you are now, if I can put it that way. But overall, collectively, we think this is a good news story. Our assessment is that Dumfries and Galloway Council continues to make good progress across a range of fronts. We see good relationships between officers and members in terms of leading and managing council services. And whilst there were some specific difficulties we identified in the Insurance and Improvement Plan to do with social work, the council appears to be accepting and recognising and taking forward its improvement agenda in those difficult areas. I should say as well that I think a pattern of the 5 AIPs that we've written for Dumfries and Galloway Council is a sense of a mature council, a council that knows itself quite well and is willing to accept constructive criticism and take it forward positively. Again, that's reflected in the AIP this year. There's only one significant piece of inspection work planned this year, you'll see from the plan. That's the social work follow-up. That reflects the significance of the issues that were identified in the Care Inspectorate's inspection. And we also have a relatively important piece of work planned next year, which is a best value follow-up piece of audit activity. That's obviously something Audit Scotland will be leading on. We think it's probably quite timely, given the amount of time that's passed since you had your last full best value audit, for us to come back and, if you like, do a health check on the council. You've been taking forward an ambitious change agenda for the last few years. We think doing a best value audit next year would allow us to come and do if you like, an assurance check on where you're making good progress and if there are some difficulties that we could help you with in terms of improvement agenda. Finally, next steps for the shared risk assessment. I think I said this last year, we're going to do a review of the shared risk assessment again. Every year we feel the need to do a review of the process. The feedback we get from councils, chief executives, is that the process works relatively well. They like the fact that scrutiny bodies talk together, share intelligence. They like the fact that you have a plan every year that tells you what you can expect in terms of your audit and inspection activity. But we think there's still scope to streamline the process a bit more. We think there's probably scope to communicate our findings more clearly. I think I remember last time I was here that some people felt that the document was a bit impenetrable, if I can put it that way. So we think there's still scope for us to communicate our messages more effectively. And I mentioned the public service reform agenda when I talked about the work we did this year. We think there's also scope for us to think a bit more creatively about what's in and out of the scope of the plan. At the moment we do a risk assessment on the council, but increasingly the council doesn't work in isolation. It works with health, police, fire, the third sector and others. I think one of the things we want to consider this year is whether or not we should be approaching the risk assessment process beyond the boundaries of the council to your partners. And it may well be that it might be useful to come and speak to the committee about that at some future time if you would find that helpful. So that's the end of my introduction. I'm very happy to take any questions for anybody, either on my briefing or on the document itself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clark. I also forgot to mention that from PricewaterhouseCoopers we've got Lindsay Patterson and Claire Connor from PwC here as well. So members, over to you. Graham.
Thanks, Chair. It's on actually page 26 there, it's or page 26 of 102. Procurement, it says no scrutiny required. Well, you scrutinise education, social services, every department in the council. Procurement is quite an important department in the council. You know, if we don't get this right, obviously, you know, we can make mistakes financially, and this is a severe risk to the council. I'm quite concerned that there's no specific scrutiny activity on the plan, as every other department in the council is scrutinising elected members, look into these things. I'm quite concerned about this because it has been raised at full council in the past that, you know, we need to support the local economy, and procurement is quite an important thing. So I just wonder why we're not going down this avenue of risk assessing this department.
Okay, David.
It's just in the same item. I think I've got concerns about this procurement. Sometimes I think we've been pushed down a road that's not necessarily the best for the council, and I think we need to be able to prove that this form of centralised procurement is the best for the council. I think we need proof on that.
Can it just come in there? Well, obviously procurement is being looked at by the council anyway, and this is Audit Scotland's report, but if Anthony, if you want to sort of respond to those two particular points, then that would be useful.
I should make clear that it isn't that we aren't interested in procurement. It's an important part of the work that we do and the risk assessment that we undertake each year. And obviously, as part of the annual audit process, your local auditors look at the council's arrangements for procurement. Specifically, we're not doing any work this year. That's because we recently published a national report on procurement in local authorities. And what we're planning to do is to do some local follow-up in each council, probably not this year, but next year, but we're in the process of thinking that through. So that would give us an opportunity to do some very specific work in Dumfries and Galloway on your approaches to procurement that would be linked in with the annual audit work that PwC will be doing anyway. So it's not off our radar, it's very much on our radar. We think it's an important issue. We wouldn't have written a national report on it if we didn't think it was important, and we plan to follow it up in the future.
Thank you. Jill?
Thank you. It's actually on the same subject. I've got several questions, but on this particular subject, you talk about the procurement capability assessment. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Because obviously you say that since 2010, you've three times since 2010, you've looked at the level of compliance, and Dumfries and Galloway currently has actually moved from 2012, where it was 38%, to 50% in 2013. Now, even although that is an improvement, it's still quite low compared to other councils in Scotland. And I just wanted you to elaborate a little bit on exactly what's involved in that process and why it is that this council seems to be now just at 50%. I think there might be an imbalance there as to how that process actually is carried out, and I just want to be clearer on that.
Okay. So the process isn't undertaken by Audit Scotland. The process is a national process that's done by ScotXL. And ScotXL gather information from all 32 local authorities against a benchmark of what they consider to be good practice. And it's the ScotXL data that we've used in our assurance and improvement plan. We obviously are interested in levels of compliance across Scotland around procurement because it's an important issue. And I think the general story, I think, is one that's not a particularly good news story for local authorities. The ScotXL data does demonstrate general improvements around procurement capacity and performance, but there's still a long way to go before Scottish local authorities are really kind of maximising the value of their procurement capacity and perhaps getting best value for money as well.
You want to come back, Jill, and then I've got Councillor Collins and Councillor Gilroy.
Yes, thank you. I actually sit on ScotXL board for this council, and I have an issue on the fact that ScotXL actually carry out basically their own scrutiny, and they that's where the issue for me arises. We are saying that Dumfries and Galloway Council is only sitting at 50%, but the benchmarking and everything's been put in place by Scotland XL, which all councils in Scotland are actually encouraged to use, and we pay to be part of that service. And I think it's an issue when the service that we have been told we have to be part of is actually scrutinising and auditing themselves. And I think that is a huge area that needs to be investigated.
Well, it's a very useful point, and I can take it back to the office and talk to my colleagues about it that have more of a focus on procurement. We have specialists in different areas. I'll speak to the guy that does our audit work in procurement and pass on your views.
Okay. Brian?
Thanks, Chair. I know it's been alluded to the recent events insofar as this council's concerned, but on page 11 at 6 and 7, there are statements made there that I believe essentially are the basic premise of the council as was at a moment in time, and therefore as the basis of the summary I see very much the projections as being redundant in the current circumstances. So I have serious concerns that I feel I'm obliged to raise at this point in time about what the future holds in that regard, not least due to recent events that have taken place, and I want that on record. Thanks.
Okay, we'll get that on record. And Patsy?
Thank you. My question is to do with the Care and Inspectorate joint inspection, and I'm looking at page 11 and section 10, when it said the inspection found the performance in relation to child protection had declined since 2010 and the effectiveness of the response to ensure children's safety and well-being was inconsistent. Performance in relation to assessing and responding to risks and needs was evaluated as unsatisfactory. I then turn to page 27, I think it is, 27, sorry, 27, and at the bottom of the page there, it says, the recent joint inspection in Dumfries, which identified a number of serious weaknesses in the collective leadership shown by the Council and its partners to safeguard the welfare of children and young people. With your indulgence, Chair, I would like to ask Mr Clark if we could move forward to the social work services management of risk report, which is item, I think we're on item, well, it's page 60. And I'm looking at the risk, business plan risks on page 60, which is CMT 004. And you see there the risk description, the potential of not adequately protecting a child or adult identified as being at risk of harm. And I'm looking at the current rating. And I am, with the reports, the words that you've used in your report and the things that have been going on, I'm quite concerned that the current risk rating is actually relatively low. I can understand the target risk rating because we'd want to get that. But what I'm asking you is our risk rating within social work appropriate?
It's a slightly difficult question for me to answer because I don't work for the Care Inspectorate and this was their inspection and I'm not a specialist in social work services. What I think I would say though is that in paragraph 10, I think we're trying to capture and summarise the very critical findings of the Care Inspectorate's inspection report, but it's focusing very much on operational practices around the way in which social work, police and others are assessing and responding to individual risks. It may be that the section you're pointing to on page 60 of the report is more to do with your arrangements for managing risk rather than across the whole service rather than individual risks. So that might explain the slight mismatch between the two.
I think to clarify that, Councillor Galloway, we can raise that during that particular report and with the service officer who's going to deliver it.
I will, but I don't know if Mr Clark and his colleagues will be here then, and I just wanted to know his views from Audit Scotland's point of view on our current risk rating within social work as a result of that report from Care Inspection.
I think our views of the risk are captured in the IP, in that we're saying that based on the inspection, the Care Inspectorate and their colleagues that undertook that joint inspection identify significant risks at that time in the social work department. It may well be that, I know the Council has responded quite positively to that inspection report and there's a report going to Council on the improvement plan, so it may well be that the assessment on page 60 captures the plans in place to address the problems that were identified in the inspection report. I'm simply trying to explain how it might well be that there might be an apparent mismatch between the two.
What Councillor Scobie then, Councillor Dyke?
It's a follow-on to that and on the same vein, because I'm looking at and it's been reported that there is a concern in social work. We've got an action plan, and indeed the inspectorate has come in and looked at children's services, but not adult services, and taken what has been found in children's services. And I think it was described to me that at least at a very senior level, it's almost that they wake up the next day hoping that no child has died, which is a high risk. But it's providing the safety and security of children, in particular those that we are corporate parents for, and how safe and secure these are. If we take, and the chair was at the Health and Safety Subcommittee, I raised the issue in social work yesterday, the social work committee, in terms of the absenteeism and the impact, the effect and impact that has on the other staff, where it's running at 3 times the level of the target figure that social work is trying to achieve. And I asked the question in terms of what are we doing in terms of the action plan and against the work that still has to be delivered and delivered with less people because of the absentee rate. Only to be told that, as it was said at the subcommittee, the Health and Safety Subcommittee, well, that's a service committee issue and you should raise it there. To be told yesterday, well, that's an issue that's going to go to the full council. I'm just wondering what our overview is in terms of the need to improve against the budget, and a budget that's decreasing, to the high risk for children, given that that's the inspection that was carried out. and I haven't even gone near Gurfic in terms of have we got that right and have we implemented. Personally, I have a huge concern in terms of Gurfic and that it is not working. So the inspectorate, I didn't need to wait on a report for the inspectorate, but it's what overview we've got as an audit committee to make sure the improvement plan is having an effect, that it is moving forward, and that there are no children at risk, far less one should die.
Well, at the very least, you'll get feedback on the follow-up inspection captured in your insurance and improvement plan next year. So when I see you next time, I'll be able to give you an update of the findings of the follow-up inspection. I'm not quite sure about how your governance structures work in terms of the feeding in from different committee to committee, or whether the Audit and Risk Committee could ask for information on a topic that would generally be the purview of another committee. I'm not quite sure how your governance structures work, so it's maybe a question for the staff and the council to answer.
Willie?
Yeah, Chair, I think it is a question of the committee, yourself and the committee, in terms of how do we get the reports, and what is our responsibility as the audit and risk to make sure that the risks are being managed and how the improvement plan is developing.
Perhaps we can go forward under the report and put a recommendation actually in there. Jill?
Okay, can I ask you to elaborate? On page 13, when you talk about, under item 17, you talk about HMICS will be inspecting local policing across Scotland, and the geographical areas for the inspection during 2014-15 still have to be determined. But as we're halfway through 2014, can you elaborate on that? And is there any further information that you can give us today as to how that's going to happen and when?
I wish I was coming here tomorrow or the day after, because we're actually meeting HMICS tomorrow afternoon to talk about their inspection programme. So I don't actually know where they're planning to do their locality-based inspection work at the moment. They've been going through a period of transition, you probably know, in terms of changes of chief inspector and new roles and responsibilities with the creation of a single force. And they've had to, as a consequence of that, to develop the new inspection model. I think they've now got to a place where they've worked out what the inspection framework's going to be. And we're meeting them, as I say, quite shortly to discuss where it is they're thinking of going and doing their local inspection work. But as soon as I know, I could certainly pass that information on to the committee.
Yeah, it was just really on that last point. I think it's of great importance to the people of Dumfries and Galloway and to this council to be kept fully up to speed with that. So I would request that as soon as you do know that you do actually give the audit committee some information and through the chair, if that was okay, if you could make sure that we were all aware of what the procedure was going to be.
Sorry, I was just wondering, you offered to come back to the Audit and Risk Committee in a few months' time, perhaps maybe in 6 months' time you can come back and give an update of the actual report, if that suit.
Yes, that would be good. I think it's important, but there are major changes, so I do think that this council needs to know exactly what's happening.
Councillor Gilroy?
Thank you. This is, I didn't catch your name, the ladies from PricewaterhouseCoopers. It's to do with the planned scrutiny activity, and I'm looking at page 12 at item 16, and it's also on page 21. And it's you're going to target audit work on the effectiveness of the Council's revised governance and scrutiny arrangement, holding officers to account and driving performance and management improvement. I just wondered how you're going to do that.
We have still to agree the scope and the format of that work through with Audit Scotland. But basically, once we've agreed terms of reference, we will bring that back to management and agree the process that we'll follow. So, as I say, we haven't agreed the format of that, but we will do so in due course.
Can I just come back on that, Chair? I mean, I noticed this is in for 2014. We're in the middle of June by now. When is this going to happen?
The work, I believe, is scheduled to be undertaken in September. So it will be planned in advance of that.
Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Chair. It's to do with Culture and Leisure Services, page 35 of 102, or it's page 29, if you look in the corner. I've got concerns, obviously. There's going to be a review of museum service, obviously, through the Council and National Museum, Scotland's and Museums Gallery. As you know, had a closure in the Abbey Ward, and it's quite concerning. Obviously, it says no scrutiny required, no specific specific scrutiny activity. I'm concerned about this. These museums bring a lot of money into the local economy. They bring tourists in here. I think, we need a root and branch review of this. Obviously, there's some severe budget savings to come in the next few years in Dumfries and Galloway Council across Scotland. I think it's quite concerning. We need to scrutinise this and look into how much money they bring into the local economy. Obviously, I certainly don't want a closed-door policy in museums across Dumfries and Galloway. I think elected members need to be fully engaged in this process when the time takes place. But I've got concern why it's not been scrutinised, Chair.
It will be scrutinised under the CCS committee, I would imagine. Perhaps one of the ways to do that is we ask CCS to take a report to their committee about that particular issue as part of the recommendations as we go forward.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually on page 28, equalities. As the budgets decrease, I suppose, and obviously every council in Scotland's got the same remit, and we all need to find savings throughout their budgets. There's a number of issues that I find quite difficult within the equality side of things. You know, in some instances we may have put forward through budget plans removal of some services in certain locations. And I just want an assurance from yourselves, really, and some information from yourselves how, we can continue to achieve, for example, ensuring our functions, policies and procedures are inclusive and not discriminatory. If I was to give you an example, we have currently, through our budgets, reduced the number of grass cutting activities across our graveyards in Dumfries and Galloway. Now, because of that, it has actually, in my opinion, implicated and put in place a two-tier system where town graveyards are being cut but rural ones aren't. And obviously there are huge issues surrounding that. And I just wanted to know about the equality side of things and where you saw that as the budget cuts move forward, and what we can actually do to address it.
Well, it's fundamentally important that the Council has a well-developed approach to doing equality impact assessments, and there's proper scrutiny and oversight of the decision-making processes that the Council makes. That would be my response to your question.
Okay, I'll ask Derek to come in on that as well.
Thanks, Chairman. Just to reassure all members, obviously, as we're aware, the increasing pressures on the finances of the Council, it is now essential that we are looking at budget options, that we actively apply the Council's impact assessment toolkit, and therefore, in turn, all committees making decisions around budget savings need to be assured that the committee consideration has taken fully into account any outcomes that are identified in that impact assessment. So clearly, going forward, it's an obligation on members and officers to be very carefully scrutinising the impact assessment results that are brought before committees of the Council, especially in relation to change of policies or indeed budget savings propositions that may be being considered.
Shirley, you want to come back?
Just very briefly, surrounding the impact assessment. I mean, obviously, through budget setting, there are budgets have got to be reduced, and I understand that, and I also understand that they have to be impact assessed. But following on from making that arrangement through the budget process, I think it's important, if things actually then fall back to committee to make a further decision, that they understand that they need to take on board the impact assessment for the whole region, because I feel that although we may have thought that the impact assessment had been carried out successfully when we made our agreement through the budget, when the follow-up reports were taken to other committees, where a determination was made there as to which graveyards, for example, were going to be cut and not cut, then the true impact assessment should have been carried out there, and I'm not so sure that that actually took place or that members were aware of that. I think it's important that we understand that process needs to take place.
I think from my own perspective, I mean, I've went on the equality impact assessment training up at Garrick, and I can assure members that the equality impact assessment do take place. Whether you agree with them or not, at the end of the day, it's an assessment of that which goes on. So I think if members would like to take equality impact assessment training, I would certainly recommend them actually going on that particular thing.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the same point, and with regard to the grass cutting and the cemeteries and so on and so forth, council made a decision and gave discretion to officers to use a budget, what assurance does the elected member have of that discretion being properly exercised by the officer or officers tasked with carrying out those responsibilities? Because the understanding of the administration of the day was that that discretion lay with officers. What assurances are there that it's been properly exercised?
My understanding is that the actual report came to DG first about the particular grass cutting in graveyards in that particular one, and the officers were not responding positively to the request by the public, and it was made clear to them that they had to do that with the budget that was actually set in place for them.
So it doesn't matter what impact assessment you might carry out, if you have that human failure, it ignores any outcome that anyone might reasonably expect where the duties carried out as requested.
I think that's the case in most risk assessments, that if you have human factors involved in there, sometimes mistakes made.
Chair, just going back on the grass cutting, obviously every area committee had a budget consultation meeting, but it's quite a lot of members of the public did raise up grass cutting, obviously in graveyards and whatnot. I'm deeply concerned, the same as other elected members. There's a lot of people have been passed away and staying in these graveyards for a number of years. But what concerns me when it comes to these budget consultation meetings, at a community meeting and that, it's not really expressed to say where we make the savings in grass cutting within graveyards or within an area of a community, or whether it's North West Dumfries or it's Stranraer. It needs to be more clear, because members of the public need to recognise where the budget savings need to be. Looking at some of these graveyards, some people have never been buried in for a long, long time. We still have a duty and a care to maintain these graveyards. That's what I'm concerned about. Obviously, when it comes to the budget consultation, when it comes down to area committee consultation with members of the public engaged, we've got to get this right, because there's a clear message here that the public are not for making cuts in this department.
Yeah, you'll be aware that full budget came to full council and that, but also DG First in each of the areas actually had meetings with regards that particular issue on the grass cutting, and showed maps of where those grass cuttings was actually going to happen. Now, if you didn't, if the members didn't attend those particular seminars or meetings, whatever were, then they would have seen where the grass cutting was supposed to take place.
Chair, I think it should be broken down to wards and maybe put forward to community councils before this comes to budget consultation. So basically, local people have got an input, and then at least elected members have got to steer which direction they want to go.
Okay, I mean, this is a budget issue at the end of the day. It's not an audit and risk issue, and we need to take this forward through the budget setting process for the next 3 years, and obviously that will come forward when the reports come to the respective committees.
Sorry, Chair. I mean, just to bring it back to the impact assessment and the quality side of things, I mean, obviously it is a risk to the council, because we have created a system where at a further committee, after we had made a decision at the budget setting committee, a further committee had determined that if your graveyard had 2% or more burials in it, then it would be cut more than if you had less than 2%. Now, that's where my concern is surrounding impact assessment and equality, because how can that be fair for all in Dumfries and Galloway? And that's what I was trying to put forward about this particular equality side of things as the budgets move forward. Because obviously more money has to come out of the budget, and we need to make sure that when things are being impact assessed, then that's been done correctly, because it was following an agreement, the budget setting process, which all 47 members agreed to, that after that it went to a further committee where a further decision was made to actually introduce this 2% rule. Now, and deciding at that time which graveyards would be cut and which ones wouldn't. And I think that should have been further impact assessed at that time. And I just think we need to be clear that if we are impact assessing, which we must do, we need to take everything into consideration while we do that.
Absolutely, take that forward, as Derek would take that forward to each of the committees to make sure that any impacts of budget cuts are considered.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to reassure you and the members, the points are taken very seriously. As you've said yourself, Councillor Dyke, it's a joint responsibility of members and officers, and there will be a budget development process report coming to full council. And again, that will clearly emphasise the importance of applying the council's policies in relation to equalities, diversity and the toolkit we have in place, and assure members of that. And in due course, the service committees reviewing budget savings will quite clearly be reminded of the importance of due diligence being applied.
Can I just ask one more question on this to do with equalities and impact assessment? After that, I promise that I'll stop. I just want to be clear that once we've actually put a process in motion, so we've actually agreed something, how much follow-up is done to make sure that actually what was impact assessed in a certain way and what we agreed should move forward is actually being done appropriately? I think that links in with what Councillor Collins was suggesting as well. I mean, obviously, we were told this was impact assessed and that there were going to be no issues. It was low risk. However, in hindsight, I personally think it's actually been high risk. So we need to understand what is put in place then to make sure that, as an audit committee, that we can see that somebody is actually scrutinising that.
Thank you, Chairman. More than happy to look at that for the members. Certainly at this point don't have that detail in front of me, but quite clearly the point's well made and quite clearly want to take that on board.
Can we just ask Audit Scotland whether or not that would be something that they would consider being appropriate?
Considering I was only going to give you one more question, that's another one you sneaked in there.
It's part of the same question.
The point you make about equality impact assessment applying not just at the point of the decision but also in terms of implementation, I think is a point well made.
Thank you very much, members. Can we go to the recommendation? Anthony, thank you very much for your brief report and introduction there and your answers to your questions. The recommendation in the report is members received a briefing from Audit Scotland and considered the Assurance Improvement Plan 2014-17 for Dumfries and Galloway Council as attached to appendix to this report. There's a couple of other recommendations. Lucy, if you can.
The two recommendations are firstly that Audit Scotland will come back in 6 months' time and give information on and report on changes. The second recommendation is that CCS will bring a report on the concerns in relation to museums to their committee.
And I think we note what Councillor Collins said about the introduction of the report as well. Jill? Sorry,
did you mention the police report coming back as well there? Sorry, I didn't catch you if you did.
I'm certainly planning to communicate to the Chair what the HMICS inspection plan is as soon as we know it.
We'll move now on to item 5, which is Education Service Risk Management Update, report by Director of Education Services. This report will be presented by Gillian Bryson. Members of this committee provide an effective scrutiny function for the Council's risk management arrangements. Therefore, in considering the report today, members are asked to consider the adequacy of risk management arrangements within Education Services. Gillian, do you wish to add anything to your report?
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, members. This paper informs members of progress with our risk management education services and asks members to consider our arrangements to identify, assess and manage risk. It focuses on the approach that we take, the way that the management team and other officers are involved, and the level of scrutiny, action and recording. I think it's important to put this in context in that for us, risk is only one side of the quality improvement triangle. It doesn't sit by itself. Risk management has clear links to what we need to do in terms of the aims in our business plan, how we know how we're doing through our performance measures, inspections and audit reports, and what we need to do now in terms of taking action. You can see from section 3.4 that in the last 6 monthly review in April, we agreed 7 risks. 5 of these have remained on the register from the previous review with updated actions. Risks number 2 and 7 have been refocused. So just to help members with that, environments for learning was previously included within the section for change management, but we focused on this risk specifically given the work ongoing at the moment. And in terms of risk number 7, school self-evaluation and improvement was removed. The reason for this was that we felt with improving inspections overall and HMIE's assurances, which you can see from the previous paper on the AIP, but we did need to raise our expectations for staff and pupils. So we've taken out our consideration of risk on self-evaluation, but we have included our need to raise aspirations, ambitions and expectations for staff and pupils. I hope this is helpful to members, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Members? David?
Julian, in the previous paper it talks about stopping early, putting kids up early for tests. What's the reason behind that? Say that instead of going forward at S5, they go forward at S4 for an exam, and they're capable of doing it. What's the reason for wanting to stop that?
In terms of early presentation, that national guidance in the main has led to quite a clear steer that we should ensure the broad general education involves no formalised assessments. So all of our schools will formally assess pupils in S4 to S6 as part of their senior phase. That was part of Curriculum for Excellence, and it's part of our Education Scotland guidance. I know we've had a bit of a mixed arrangement with our curricular structures across our secondary schools, and we've had 2 years of transition to bring them all into that into line with that. But we're quite confident that no pupils will be disadvantaged by this, and our attainment continues to improve.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Witts and Councillor Dykes and Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chair. These past couple of months have seen a dramatic rise in the number of placement appeals. So I'm looking, I see the pained expression on the officer's face, and I share her pain. I feel her pain. I am wondering if this is what is being reflected in the risk reference ES 001 as one of the categories. Would that be correct? And how do we address this?
Not specifically. I think that clearly having appropriate capacity and learning environment for all our pupils is really important. Parental choice for attending schools is enshrined in law, and we make as best provision as we can for pupils who wish to attend local schools. So we haven't made specific reference to that in the risk register, but we certainly do have to look at our enrolment and placement appeals procedures, and service officers along with our legal officers met yesterday so that next year we can make absolutely sure that all parents have got the right information and feel well supported through the appeals process.
Councillor Dyke.
Thank you, Chair. My question's really to do with the provision of school estate and environments for learning. I mean, obviously, you're talking about major projects here. I have a question because I would have thought, looking at this risk register, that I would have seen on the risk register, you have no mention at all when you're looking at major projects about the use of our procurement section. And I don't think that any major projects should be being carried out without the involvement of our procurement section. So therefore, if we're going ahead with new school builds or anything else, procurement is a very valuable tool that we have within the council. And I think that both procurement and contract management is vitally important if we're moving forward with new developments. And I would like to have had something on this risk register to stipulate that if you're without the use of procurement and contract management, we are actually causing this council a risk. And I think it's important that we need to make sure that they're involved in anything that's carried out.
Julian, if you then Derek wants to comment.
And I thank you for that comment. Actually, I suppose I assumed, but never assume, that contract management procurement would be within the project management plan for the state. But I think it's very helpful, particularly with the previous paper and with the work we're doing with corporate business support, that we actually make it explicit within this. It's certainly what we're doing with the procurement team. They are coming to the management team to help us improve our rates for procurement over the next couple of weeks. I haven't made explicit mention to that right throughout the risk register, so that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. It's just that if a failure to use what we've got in place already and a failure to use contract management throughout the process could cause this council a major risk. We have seen it in the past, and I think contract management's a big issue for all councils in Scotland because we do not seem to have in place any individuals who are fully qualified as contract managers taking up contract management positions, and we tend to kind of slot somebody else into that process, and that's where a lot of councils have fallen down. I think it's important that we bring that into play.
I'll ask Derek to come in before Councillor Bell and Councillor Prentice.
Thank you, Chairman. As Councillor Dykes is aware, as a member of Scotland Excel, certainly the importance of the procurement and the contract management is recognised. Our own Scrutiny Performance Committee are about to consider this at a seminar in due course, and there will also be a report on the Audit Scotland national report, and we'll certainly be taking that on board. I think it would be helpful as part of the description, as Gillian's indicated, to just be clear that we'll have the effective application of council procurement contract management added in here, but also to reassure members that the procurement team are actively working across council services to ensure that we are rigorous in terms of both procurement and contract management, and that's something, as I say, that the Scrutiny Committee are very much involved in at the present time.
Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I'm not an Education Committee, but maybe a question here about attainment levels and obviously risks to the Council. Obviously, HMIE inspections across a number of schools in Dumfries and Galloway take place across Scotland. I maybe got concerns that we're not inspecting the schools on a regular basis, and obviously we're looking at a number of schools have been inspected over a period of time over Dumfries and Galloway in the last couple of years. I'm quite concerned that we should have regular inspections across the schools within a time period. The reason being, this could be a risk to Dumfries and Galloway Council and to the Education Department if we're not actually exploring all these avenues. We'll have risk management and inspections and social work in other departments. I just feel that some of the schools, we need to be quite robust in that. There's a period of time some schools have been failing, and the HMI have to come back and do a report. Obviously, the council come back, do back a report, and the school and an appraisal. I think it's quite important we'll have a rigorous policy of inspecting these schools through the HMI, and I think it should be stepped up. I certainly don't want a Scottish Government box-ticking exercise just to prove it on a piece of paper, but I think it needs to be done, and there could be a risk here to the education of people, the children of Dumfries and Galloway. So hopefully, Chair, we need to look into this.
Gillian, you want to?
Clearly we'll comply with any external inspections, and as any school that's indicated that they're being inspected, clearly we comply fully with that, but we augment the inspection regime with our own internal review. Recently, I don't think we have reported this to Education Committee because it is part of our internal quality assurance procedures, but we have paired every single school in Dumfries and Galloway up with another school so that we have a team of auditors going into the school over a 3-year period. The schools know when they are going to be involved, and a full and formal report is written on our view to support their school self-evaluation, if that's helpful.
Can we come back, Graham?
Just back on HMI, I believe in the past in some of the local authorities, there's just that the Director of Education would have handed a number of files to the HMI to inspect. Only handed a number, so a number were never actually put forward. So some schools on a regular basis were inspected, and some were slipped to net for a number of years. Is this still happening in Dumfries and Galloway Council, or are we going to get an open field in this one?
In terms of what is handed to the Director of Education, I'm not aware that that occurs. I believe that
they did in the past.
Well, there's a random selection of schools which is on a rolling programme, a time-bound programme. Certainly, if an indication, we might get an indication that a school is on the radar, so that we are allowed to identify if there are issues the HMI should know. So it may be head teacher absence or illness or an issue within the school, but that is just in advance of the school being notified of inspection. That's all I'm aware of.
I think you help that along. Obviously, HMI have their inspection of programmes, and obviously we as a council will work with them to try and suggest areas where they can actually move. Councillor Prentice?
Maybe a bit of a daft laddie question, but you know, I've got grandchildren going through the secondary system in this country and in other parts of the world. I'm just curious to if Gillian could maybe give me some idea of her opinion of why in the World League education attainment, and this is following on from what Davy and Graham were saying, education attainment in general in the UK is going down, and in other parts of the world it's going up. And I'm just curious to know, do we ever look at other parts of the world, how they actually teach children in, say, Japan, South Korea, all these countries which are very, very high attainers in the education league tables?
Maybe got something to do with the amount that we pay the teachers and things like that, but obviously there's a cultural difference and things like that.
And it's a question that's right up my street. I will try to be brief because it's an area of interest for me. But yes, we do. We look in detail at other countries, both at a national level and at a local level. That's why we introduced standardised assessment, because we wanted some clear Scottish, UK and international benchmarks for our children and young people, both in literacy, numeracy and science. So we have the information that we need. We are looking closely at the use of standardised assessment in Massachusetts, for example. That's internationally recognised as using the standardised assessment very well. Clearly, we've got a focus on Scandinavia and the models that they're using in school leadership in Scandinavia. So, yes, is the answer to your question. It's not always easy to transpose one process into a different culture, but we certainly do watch with interest what others are doing.
You want to come back, George, and then count?
Yeah, very briefly, actually, Chair. It just worries me that you know, when we're trying to attain a level playing field for all our children, that we're maybe bringing high attainers, children who are very bright and keen to attain very high qualifications, if that's not the right word, but we're actually bringing them down to the average level. That's what it appears to me, anyway.
If I may, it's a comment more than an answer, I'm afraid, but I think the risk number 7 really tries to focus on that. We've been looking at closing the gap. One way of closing the gap is, as you say, by lowering the attainment of the highest achieving. We're very clear that that must not happen. So we are looking to explicitly raise the bar, have high targets in our business plan as from September, and some of our attainment is the best in Scotland, and I'm not sure we actually shout about that. And I think we have to be very clear that we've got very high expectations for all of our pupils.
Councillor Gilroy.
Thank you. Mine is on human resources. It's number 5, and it's exactly following on from the debate we've just been having. And I just wonder, you know, the target is in the red at the moment, current risk. The target risk is then going down to yellow, which is good, but I'm just wondering if you're going to be able to achieve that. And I'm also particularly interested in the regular evaluation of cluster working review and partnership head teacher models. I wonder where that's going to be reviewed and who's going to see that and discuss it.
Thank you. There are 3 related items within this risk. The first is provision of primary supply staff. I think Education Committee and area committees will be aware of some of the challenges we've had with supply staff in primary, particularly in some of our rural schools. This review was undertaken in April, so we were just at the Easter holidays, and we are still working hard to recruit and retain our staff, but there has been a shortage of supply staff across Scotland. So that is why we've had to be very proactive in our recruitment, going to our local negotiating committee, seeking approval from members in terms of having enhanced recruitment packages and the like. So that is it's a national picture, but it is exacerbated in some of our small rural schools. In terms of leadership positions, we have an ongoing leadership succession management plan because it is difficult to recruit head teachers to primary schools in rural areas. Again, a national and international picture, but we work really hard to make sure we develop people through the system. And in terms of partner head teachers, I think it's been generally successful. There are some really good news stories. We have 21 from the plan, 25 partnerships in action, and there is a 6-monthly review committed to Education Committee. So we went back, I think it was March we did our last review, and our implementation officer will be coming back in 6 months to report on that. But again, if there are individual questions on partnerships that we can answer, I'm happy to take those offline.
Just to follow up on that with the lack of supply or the shortage of supply teachers, we did the Refresh programme for education, and that sort of released quite a lot of older qualified teachers. Are they not allowed to come back into the system, or have they chosen not to do so? Because there must be a wealth of experience out there for supply teaching, and I just wonder.
Yeah. They are allowed to come back. They're not coming back on the same contract. So yes, they are allowed to come back. Some of them choose not to, and that's their right. But yes, they are a valuable pool of experienced staff that can come in and support staff in short term. But basically, we just don't have quite enough in some areas. It's very localised.
Okay, thanks members. We'll go to the recommendations then, and the recommendation is members are asked to decide whether the risk management arrangements and education services are adequate, and there's a note here to add in the operational wise. Gillian will take on the procurement and the contract management side and give reports back to members at the respective committee. Yep. Okay, we'll move on to report number 6, which is social work services management of risk. Report by Interim Chief Social Work Officer. This report will be presented by Matthew Healy. Members of this committee provide an effective scrutiny function for the Council's risk management arrangements. Therefore, in considering the report today, members are asked to consider the adequacy of risk management arrangements within social work services. Matthew, do you wish to add anything else to your report?
Thank you, Chair. I will, if you don't mind, just take a few moments to introduce the report and to add a couple of pieces. Particularly draw members' attention to paragraph 3.11 of the report and highlight that work is ongoing within the service at present to further update the risk register. And this includes a further session later this month to look specifically at the risks around adult and child protection, partly in response to the recent Care Inspectorate report. It's always difficult, I suppose, to predict the future, but I would expect that the number of risks and also the categorisation of risks for social work will therefore change in the future. I would expect that we will see more risks in the future, and the current categorisations will change. But that's work that's currently ongoing and can be reported back in due course. The only other thing that I would like to add is that members will also be aware of the senior staff restructuring, which is ongoing within social work services. There's a new management team coming in. There's a further restructuring beneath that level as well, and therefore that undoubtedly will bring a refreshed look, if you like, at the overall risk management arrangements within social work. So again, I think we can expect that there will be some further changes brought about by those arrangements as well, Chair. So that's probably all I would add, but obviously very happy to try and take any questions that members may have.
Thank you, Matthew. Councillor Gilroy?
Yeah, well, could I just have your opinion on item 4 on page 60 with the impact of the current risk rating and I can understand the target risk, but it's the current risk rating. You'll have heard me before say I was surprised that it was there and not higher as a result of various inspections and so forth. And also, I'm looking at SW04 on page 61. It's the one at the bottom, where I would have thought in this day and age that a failure of an electronic system would be quite a high risk, bearing in mind how everything has to be done. It's not done with pencils and papers anymore. So I'm just quite surprised that's so low on your risk rating, and that you haven't got a very high target either. Yeah. So could you comment on both?
Certainly. Thank you. I think in terms of risk CMT 004, I think I would accept the point that the current likelihood of that risk occurring needs to be revised in light of the Care Inspectorate report, and that's work that we will take on board. There's a session planned in June to look specifically at adult and child protection, and despite obviously the significant work that's ongoing in order to address the care inspectorate's concerns, I think that the point is well made, and the likelihood of that risk obviously has to change, albeit that we will try and manage that as best we can. As regards SW04, again, I think the point is well made. I think the impact of that risk occurring would be high, and I think that's what we've tried to show here. I think what we have done, though, is given the mitigating circumstances and the controls that both the service and also corporately we have around that, what we're saying is that the likelihood of that risk occurring is actually relatively low, because we are able to manage that through ourselves and, as I say, through the corporate systems. So I think that's one that we need to look at both impact and likelihood, and the impact would be high, but the likelihood of that at the moment is low.
Out of interest, with these matrices, do you think that is in the right place then for that one? For the current risk rating?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
I think also with the IT systems that you talked about as well, there are also the business continuity issues that are being considered and improved through the work that's been carried out with the council with their IT systems, which is helping that particular area. Any other members? Okay, can we go to the recommendation then? Sorry.
On the recommendations, we're going there. I do have a problem with 2.2, and it's the word may. I don't think...
Can we agree 2.1 first, and then we'll go to 2.2?
Okay.
Okay,
yes.
so 2.1 is consider the current arrangements in place for identification, assessment, management, risk controls for social work services. And 2.2, have you a suggestion? Should
be made. I mean, I think may is very lightweight and doesn't give a flavour of the seriousness of this. So mayday, yeah, absolutely. So I think it should be stronger. I don't know. I'd take advice from Lucy. Maybe it's what she would suggest.
I would agree with that recommendation. It would be a stronger. Yes, definitely. Should would be a lot better word.
So perhaps a form of words, Mr.
So the recommendation then would be note that improvement should be made in light of the joint inspection of the Children's Service Improvement Plan. Sorry,
I don't agree with the word may or should. Surely we should be saying will be, because we've taken on board the criticism, we've made arrangements to make improvements, and therefore that word should read will and not may or should.
Okay. So
in my opinion, or must.
Chair, on 313, I think the inspection hadn't been reported when this paper was done, because it says in there that the current arrangement are considered satisfactory, recognising joint inspection of children's services and the review of the service risk rated by the SWS senior management team may identify areas of improvement.
Yeah, I think that what we're looking at is a continuous improvement through the audit and risk process. I agree with Jill that noting the improvements will be made in light of the joint inspection of children's services improvement plan and departmental consideration of service risk register as detailed at paragraph 313. We're basically saying to the department we want to see those improvements made as soon as possible, and it's and I think that's right.
Do we, as a committee, put that forward to Social Work Committee? How do we do that?
I believe that will be going to Social Work Committee anyway, and as part of the recommendation that could be included in the report.
Yeah, just happy, Chairman, just to confirm clearly, stage 1 of the report is going to full council, and on that basis it would certainly be appropriate for this committee to note that you've considered the position, and the expectation is that there will be changes, and these will then be taken forward by the Service Committee.
Okay. Thank you very much, Matthew. We'll move now on to item number 7, Health and Safety Progress Report, reported by Director Chief Executive. The report will be presented by Sue White, and this report provides members with an update on the Corporate Health and Safety Action Plan for the period of 1st of October 2013 to 31st of March 2014. Sue, do you want to add anything to your report?
I'm happy to take any questions unless you'd like any more information.
Any members? This was actually raised at the Joint Health Safety Committee, and it was agreed that the improvements have actually been made in the Health and Safety Action Plan. There were a couple of issues that were taken on board at the Health and Safety Committee, although it wasn't quorate. It was certainly the actions were taken on board by members that were actually in that particular meeting. If there are no members willing to speak, we'll go to the recommendations. Members are asked to review the corporate performance against the Corporate Health and Safety Action Plan for the previous 6 months. Are we happy with the recommendation? Okay, thank you. We now move on to report number 8, Dumfries and Galloway Council's Record Management Plan, report by Director Chief Executive Service. This report will be presented by Aaron Linden. The Council has a statutory duty to develop and implement a records management plan. The records management plan sets out proper arrangements for the management of the Council's public records, and if approved by this committee, the plan will be submitted to the Keeper of the Records of Scotland, who will formally assess the Council's plan.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much indeed. I think you, obviously members, will know that the Public Records Scotland Act 2011 has placed requirements upon the Council as a local authority, as a public authority, to ensure that we have proper arrangements to manage our records. And to that extent, the Keeper under Section 1.4 of that Act expects local authority, the Council, to provide the details and evidence to satisfy him that the records management plan can be implemented. So this is the kind of first tier, if you want. It's to satisfy the Keeper that we have the necessary tools, we have the necessary policies in place to ensure that we deliver an effective records management. 14 elements in the plan. All authorities have had to submit them, and just to say that I think we are the 5th authority, local authority, to be submitting our plan. Quite a lot of work from the services to pull together, which again, the information that's in the plan, which shows again that we're not starting from scratch, Chair. Records management, in some form, some services have adopted their own way of classifying or organizing records. What we haven't got and what we're moving to is a corporate, is a consistent system under the legislation. And with that comes the requirement to ensure there is senior management responsibility, that is identified in the plan about who signs off the plan. There has to be clear evidence of records management policy being in place, because that's what will inform, to a large extent, the development of any system, electronic or otherwise, that we introduce to manage records management. Data security, of course, information security, very, very important. Destruction, disposal, schedules are very, very important, because obviously we are assessing a rise in the number of records and documents as we move forwards towards rationalizing office spaces, etc. What we can see is that the rise in records in documentations are causing problems, and they bring risks as well. So we have to look at technology. We have to look at a smarter way of working. It will require change in the way we work, in the way we treat records. But more importantly, we've got to make sure that we communicate to the service users out there and customers that the information they give to us is managed in a way which is consistent, which is compliant with the legislation. We also need to take the onus of responsibility on us. I think we place quite a lot of responsibility on service users and customers to fill this form, fill that form, and etc. we've got to take the onus of responsibility to speak to customers and take the control of recording the information. So it's important that we do that. We, under the ambit of my unit certainly, and the Council's policy, you will be aware we've made strides towards data protection in terms of personal security. Freedom of information, there's an established framework here, and we are delivering on that. I think records management comes along, and I think we need to ensure that we comply with that. Just to say, Chair, I mean, there has been, I mean, the plan that you have there, as I said, it's the report is seeking your approval for basically for us to submit that. That plan has to be with the keeper by the 15th of June, and after which the keeper will announce his formal decision. The plan, the submission of the plan after today will be the formal submission of the Council. We've had some preliminary work. My staff have certainly been negotiating with the National Records Services at national level at the Keeper's Office. We've had a preliminary assessment on a kind of draft plan that we submitted, and I have to say informally that there's been no areas that the Keeper have identified that there are any weaknesses at all. All the evidence that we've cited and indeed submitted have met his satisfaction. I'm fairly confident that I think we will get approval from the Committee, but I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Judith. That's quite a good assurance. Over to Jill.
Thank you. It's really just surrounding, if you look at element 11, the audit trail in particular, where it says it's recognised that at present the Council does not have a comprehensive procedure in place in relation to audit trails. It says what you're going to do. Also, I think there's 2 or 3 others similar to that. I just think as an audit committee, I would quite like to have an update going forward, because obviously we're saying we don't have the correct processes in place at the moment, but this is what we're actually going to do. I want to be clear that we're going to see something come back where we can actually see some of that improvement so that we can actually question what's happening. And I would like to just ask the Chair if he would agree to that actually coming back to us so that we can see what's happening in the process.
I'm happy to give the assurance, Chair, at 3.4. I've already committed to the fact that a further report will be submitted once the Keeper's approval of this. There will be regular updates, and of course I've indicated that the Corporate Business Support Group will assume a very specific role in terms of the overall responsibility of the monitoring, the scrutiny of the plan. But absolutely clear is that the committee will be kept updated on, particularly on those areas, as you indicate, Councillor, where, yes, we may have said we've nothing there. They're all part of what the Keeper has termed improvement area.
I'm just looking at the time scales for this, Judy. It obviously has to go through process and all that. Would 6 months be appropriate to come back and give an update on how far along we are?
More than reasonable, sir. Chair.
Thank you, Chair, but Councillor Dykes read my mind and asked exactly the same question I was going to ask, and then you asked about time frames, and that was the second part of my question. So between the two of you, you've sunk me. Thank you anyway.
Any other members? Okay, we'll go to the then members are asked to approve our Council's Records Management Plan for submission to the Keeper of Records of Scotland as detailed in the appendix, and then we'll have a report back on updated 6-month intervals. Thank you. Thank you, Judith. Going on to report number 9, Controls Assurance Statement for 2013-14, report by Director Chief Executive Service. This report will be presented by, I'm making sure Kevin's in here before this. Yes. Kevin Gary. The report outlines the Chief Internal Audit's formal Controls Assurance Statement for 2013-14. Kevin, do you wish to add anything to your report?
Thank you, Chair. Not really. This is a report that comes before the committee once a year. It's important as part of the sort of assurance structure and framework. We've moved as a council to now producing what's called a corporate governance statement, which members may recall was actually at this committee at the last meeting, a draft of that. So sort of sitting underneath the corporate governance statement is this document, my assurance. But in some ways, although this is less visible now, it's still quite important that the council, that the committee receives this and understands what I'm saying each year. This year's message is it's fine. Our systems and processes, internal control arrangements are quite satisfactory. So it's a positive assurance this year, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any members? We go to the recommendation. Members are asked to receive Chief Internal Audit Control Assurance Statement for 2013-14. We have received it. We're happy with it. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll now go on to report number 10, internal audit reports issued. Report by Director Chief Executive Service. This report will be presented by Kevin again. This is the standing item on the agenda of the Audit and Risk Management Committee to allow members to discuss reports issued by internal audit. Kevin, do you wish to add anything? We'll go into the first one then, which is data protection, risk management and education. Chair.
Hi, thanks, Chair. I'm concerned that on page 3, you've got council-sensitive personal information being held on private devices. Surely that should not be allowed at all. It's quite concerning that if that is happening, it's very concerning. And I'd like to know just what your views are on that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this has been identified as a potential rather than as a fact, but it is quite clear that a number of staff across the council use personal devices, and clearly there's the potential for data to wind up on those devices. So we've raised this with education because we see it as a potential problem for them. There'll need to be some work done on it, in particular using the GLOW system, the education system, and using that to email stuff which could have personal sensitive information in it. It may simply be a matter of issuing guidance to staff and explaining, the inherent dangers in that. We have quite a good control system for PCs, which can be used over an extended period of time and can acquire what might be considered to be sensitive personal information. So when these PCs are finished with, we have very secure arrangements for destroying those. But obviously, if somebody has a personal device, a handheld device of some kind, we don't get to dispose of that device. So it's just a matter of taking care and being aware of the risk involved that these devices can wind up with some stuff on them. So a little bit of work needed on that one, Chair, but we're confident arrangements will be sorted out on it.
Jill, then Alistair.
Thank you, Chair. It was just on page 2, again, as a ranking 1, the records not meeting the requirements of the Act. And obviously that's quite concerning, and I just wanted your views on that. On page 2, records not meeting the requirements of the Act. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th one down.
Yes, case files. This is a Category 1 recommendation. It's actually referred to in the external report that's been received recently. We have not looked at case files as part of this audit. We felt that was an unnecessary intrusion, but we're aware that the standard of case files is very important. And as I said, that's referred to in the external inspection as well. So we were looking for some kind of mechanism being in place to make sure that these records are in fact up to scratch. And so our recommendation is that there should be, education should be carrying out some kind of programme of review to make sure that they meet the standard. So we didn't look at any records ourselves specifically.
So as an audit committee then, are we going to make a recommendation to the Education Committee that this is carried out? Obviously, as an audit committee, this has been brought to our attention, and we need to, as an audit committee, make sure that we are advising the Education Committee that we have a concern over this.
Chair, I think the mechanism, this is a report to education, so they've received it. We've agreed an action, which is that the Senior Child Protection Officer will institute a programme of reviews. So in that sense, the action is already in place. it's not necessarily necessary to draw the attention of the Education Committee to it. That would occur, I think, if we had any concern that progress hadn't been achieved. So it's a Category 1 recommendation, which is quite an important Category 1. Follow-up on that will come back to this committee, of course, in the tracking report. So you'll get information when we're satisfied that an appropriate programme is in place. We'll come back to you. If we had a concern at that point, perhaps that would be the time to draw Education Committee's attention to it specifically.
Thanks, Chair. Page 2, the risk to be addressed, the last one on the page. A copy of a confidentiality agreement not being available for all staff. I can understand the difficulty there in cases of peripatetic teachers who go around different schools. So my question is, how would we decide where this agreement was to be placed? Would it be on one of the schools that they visit or in some other central location?
That's exactly the point being made, Chair, in particular in relation to peripatetic staff around a number of schools. If it was required to locate the confidentiality agreement, at the moment there'd have to be a bit of searching done. So the idea is that probably these records will be centralised for that group of staff, and there'll be checks made to make sure that they have those records or they have those agreements signed in all cases.
So would the centralising be done at one of the schools they visited, or perhaps in the education offices, or is that just something we'll have to just, we're recommending should be considered and maybe the best option? A consensus reached on it perhaps by the people that are involved?
Yes, I think it's a question of collation. Whether they'll sit in a specific school, whether they'll sit centrally, I'm not sure. But as I say, we'll have further discussions again as part of the follow-up for this. The solution that they'll develop for this, they'll need to satisfy us that they've met that risk and they've dealt with the requirement. So maybe be in a better position to inform you when we come back and report on achievement of this recommendation.
Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, I referred to it earlier in the first report, and apologies, meeting with the leader. But, you know, I referred to it in the external audit, and that was under GIRFIC. And we've already had a seminar on GIRFIC only this week, was it this week or last week? I can't remember now. But anyway, I think it was highlighted by Pat Shearer, who is trying to work on this in terms of children's services. But one of the big issues is that the responsibility, the named person, if the child is between the age of 5 and 16, is education. And again, I've raised the issue with the Chief Executive in terms of is GIRFIC working, and he has asked, you know, well, give us 6 months to try and get plays with, and it refers here to partnership working, where health has a part to play as well. There is a huge element of risk if we don't get it right for every child, and it's that high risk in terms of that the named person in education is the head teacher of each of the primaries, and then a designated person in the secondaries. And it's that all the partners are invited to the table, and it's a wide issue in terms of assessment. And there are high risks for children in here, in education, if we don't get it right. And it's, as it's currently being operated, I think the Chief Executive explained it as we've got education and social work here and health away out here. And it's that high risk, and whether Kevin is picking up on this in terms of, you know, education and GIRFIC and everything else.
Obviously, this is a review of data protection risk management, which will obviously cover some of that. Kevin, do you want to answer?
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, I don't have much to offer on this, really. GIRFIC is a very important programme. It ties in with council priorities. It's a terrific ambition. If it's, you know, if we can achieve that, if all local authorities in Scotland can achieve that, it's fantastic. We'll be making a huge difference. In the meantime, in trying to progress GIRFIC, there are some significant challenges, particularly around partnership working and other elements, introducing some new ideas and providing that appropriate focus. So we're kind of towards the beginning of that process. So I think it is important to keep it under focus. I think it is important to keep it in mind, but I don't think it's right at this stage to be saying it's failing because it's too soon in the process. It's far too soon. Unfortunately, I think, from a personal point of view, GERFEC might not work in Scotland because of the challenges that it meets, but as a personal perspective, so far as we're concerned, it's a programme that the Council is committed to. There's a great deal of energy and work going into it to try and make it work and achieve it. There's a bit of a way to go, and risks within that are being considered. We've had discussions as part of the corporate risk register, what elements of GERFEC, or whether it's the whole thing, needs to be considered as a corporate risk. So there are discussions going on, and I think nobody's taking their eye off the ball on this one, but I can't give you an absolute rock-solid guarantee that everything's perfect.
Okay, thank you. That's the internal audit report for a review of data protection, risk management and education services. Do we agree with the action plan that's moving forward there? Yeah, thank you very much. Move on to the next one, which is internal audit of main financial systems report. Kevin, do you want to add anything?
Thank you, Chair. This is part of, in fact, the previous report, which was part of the controls assurance statement. This work contributes to that in a significant way. This is following up last year's main financial systems audits reports. We're quite thorough in this, so there's a fair amount of narrative on it, but there are no particular concerns that have emerged from that work. Some recommendations it wasn't possible to deliver on, or adjustments were made to them. But as I say, as part of the dialogue with the services involved, we're pretty satisfied that the work that was done last year on main financial systems has resulted in improvement and change.
Happy to accept that report now. Move to the next one, which is a review of small plant and equipment in DG first. I bet this was an interesting one for you, Kevin. Can we move anything to add to it?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this came out of this was an unplanned audit. You'll remember our report on how many days we spent on jobs. This was one of the jobs we did as an unplanned piece of work. I think it was a fair concern. There was a concern expressed about this. Basically, in need of some improvement. But not, not so concerning, shall we say, that we had to run around in a bit of a panic about it. I think record improvement could be achieved. Mostly, this equipment is reasonably well controlled in the circumstances. So, some improvement recommendations, but no category ones.
You say reasonably well controlled. I mean, this is across different depots across Dumfries and Galloway. You reasonably be assured that those protective issues are in place to make sure that we don't lose any of this equipment, or it's not being sold on, that type of thing. Because that's some of the concerns that I certainly get from not only members of the public, but members of staff as well.
Yes, Chair. I mean, I was thinking before we did this audit, what I was looking for instance, was total destruction of small equipment when we finished using it, so it could not be taken away and sold on. The response we got, and I think it was a fair response, was to say actually we strip the things down and take any usable parts off them. So we're very rarely disposing of a strimmer or a piece of equipment of that kind intact. Usually there's a bit of a head or something, or a shaft that's been bent and so on. So it's pretty good. It's difficult. This is very operational. We've got men out doing work quite intensively over some periods of time. This equipment is very important to them to be able to do their job. It needs to work. And there does seem to be a commitment to get the very best out of the stuff. But there comes a point when we need to dispose of what's left of it. And we're satisfied that overall the arrangements are okay.
Thank you, Jill.
Sorry, I just wanted to check that anything, obviously, if they were purchasing new equipment, I'm presuming that then in that case that anything would be that was second-hand could be traded in against the new equipment, if at all possible?
Again, we've come across a case where they got some new equipment and they preferred a different sort of equipment, so they were kind of trying to do a bit of a deal, which we were a bit concerned about. But, we'd rather you get the right equipment in the first place, kind of thing. So yes, questions like that occur to me, but I'm satisfied that what happens is the equipment is used almost to the point of destruction. So we're not really in a position where, okay, we're trading up or we're swapping it out, because if we've got a piece of equipment, we'll use it to the death, so to speak.
Not really, but I hear what you say.
Is everybody happy with the action plan in that particular audit report? Sorry, David.
I think Councillor Dykes is right. If you're you've got a piece of equipment, for want of a better word, is knackered. It is replaced with a new piece of equipment, and the code numbers, I notice you've now got their code numbering all these smaller items. The code numbers should be shown up on the new item with its code number and the code number of the piece of equipment that it's replacing. Because there's talking here about them, a couple of, well, guys got new equipment, didn't they, suit them, and they went to try and do a swap with some trader in the town, I assume, or some town, and that's not acceptable. It's got to be an exchange of old equipment for new, and that should be registered somewhere, and there should be a register showing everything that whoever's in charge of the vehicle, all the equipment that's in that vehicle, there should be a list, a register kept somewhere. Or should be two registers, one in the vehicle and one in the store.
I agree. I think it comes back to what we were talking about earlier on with procurement and things like that, making sure that people don't have that, opportunity to do that, and make sure the management arrangements are actually in place for that to happen. Jill?
You're quite right. In my opinion, it is to do with procurement, and actually the procurement department should be involved in anything to do with purchasing of new equipment, because all that the operators should be doing is to specify what it is that they're looking for. Is it a lawnmower that can cut grass to a certain level and collect it? That's all they should be doing, and then somebody should be procuring that. It's not up to them to decide that actually we prefer model, I don't know, a Honda compared to a Suzuki or something like that. It shouldn't be about that. It should be about they specify what it is that's required to do the job. That's why they need to supply a specification, and somebody else procures it. I can't hark on about this enough. I just think there is a huge issue about how we are not, as a council, using the procurement department to the best of its ability, because we're allowing far too many people the opportunity to purchase. And unless you're a proper qualified procurement person, then you cannot purchase in the same way. All you should be doing is specifying the piece of equipment that's required, what it's needed to do, not what type, make or model you want.
Although it would be best, first of all, to sort of consult with the user so they've got the best equipment in the first place.
Yes, exactly.
Chair, I'm sorry if I've given the impression that this is a sort of slightly Wild West type situation. Purchase of the equipment is actually very carefully controlled. It's signed off by the manager, the senior manager, and they're quite mean, should we say, the outlook about purchasing equipment. So at an operational level, you have in hand at any time, you might have one or two new pieces of kit coming in for a season. You have kit all the way through to that's probably 5 or 6 years old and has been sort of gerrymandered a bit to make it work. So the judgment about what's required is being made centrally based on a lot of experience. So it isn't, the purchasing isn't being done by the operatives. It is being handled appropriately.
Yes, but as Councillor Driver has said, and quite rightly, the operatives are the people who use the equipment on the ground, and they are the people that should be saying, this is what we need to do our job. Not what type, make or model, but what actually is required, because I think Councillor McGee alluded to it as well, there are huge issues with what's actually being purchased to what's required to do the piece of work.
Councillor Scobie?
Yeah, Chair, if you just permit me a wee bit of hilarity and not wishing to take away what Jill's saying as to whether it's a Honda or a Suzuki or whatever, tell me we got a number of grass cutting boxes for sale, given we don't lift the grass cuttings.
I'll allow that one. So that's the internal audit for review of small plants and equipment. And any other? No, so we're happy with that response, and we'll deal with the procurement through the other reports that we had. The last one is the internal audit report, income from fishing permits at Dumfries Borough Waters. Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. This was good in lots of ways, because what happened was member staff had a concern about some financial figures and asked us to have a look at it with them. And that's a good thing. That's quite positive. It demonstrates they had the confidence to bring forward a problem. It demonstrates that they thought internal audit was the right place to bring it. So there are lots of positives out of this. The sort of the negative is the arrangements have kind of fallen between the stools a wee bit because of changes in area committee framework and that sort of thing. So at the end of the day, there was a fair amount of work involved in this, but the short story is fortunately there was no shortfall in income. However, we can't guarantee that every penny arising from fishings wound its way up in the council's coffers because of the system and the arrangements that were in place. And we've made recommendations and we've had acceptances to change the arrangements so we can be much more certain in the future that all fishing's income does make its way to the council. But we have no overall concern other than the administrative processes needed sorting out. We have no overall concern about missing money or anything of that kind here.
And as part of the action plan going forward, they were happy with the response that you gave them and they're going to work that forward, yeah? Thank you. Anybody else? I'm sure there's a tail in there somewhere.
Yes, we were just considering about the fact that we do need to reel them in.
Okay, we get that. Okay, thank you. So we're now on to item 11, which is a report by Kevin again on the internal audit update of the 2014-15 annual plan. The report makes adjustment to the 2014-15 internal audit plan in accordance with the decisions made at the previous committee meeting. Anything to add to it, Kevin? I think I would agree that the amendments are actually made in that particular report that we did decided at the last committee. Is everybody happy with that? Okay. Agree. And I've got no further business. Thank you very much for attending, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see what happens in the future.